Greetings, adventurers! Welcome to Miniature Legends, a place where even the smallest of figures can be legendary. I am Zaxitar, artist and wizard, and if you're new here, I make videos on the wide variety of magics in the mini-painting hobby, whether that be Warhammer, 3D printed alchemy, terrain crafting, board games, tabletop RPGs, or whatever else catches my eye. I give you this background, adventurers, because I am always looking to learn more about the magics of mini-painting. And during this May, I took the opportunity to explore a realm of miniatures that I have no experience with. Gundams. You see, I was wandering through a local charity shop and spotted this Gundam model kit for a very cheap price. I knew of an online celebration called Mecha May, where painters celebrate and paint all things mechs, and I figured this was a wonderful opportunity to give these models a try and to share my impressions with you all. So I purchased the kit and got to work. I started by opening the sprues from their packaging. My first impression is these plastic bags are rather wasteful, considering they could have been combined into one. Planning on painting this miniature, I gave each sprue a thorough scrub with soap to remove any remaining mold release agent, then left them to dry. I got to work assembling the mech. The directions were very well done, and I didn't have any serious issues with the assembly process. I would say this took about an hour or so. I took a bit of time off camera to clean up any mold lines and disassemble the model for priming. Then, I applied a thorough coat of matte black primer through my airbrush, making sure to target hard-to-reach areas. While this miniature didn't come with a base, I absolutely love basing my miniatures, crafting a tiny slice of their worlds to take along with them. So, I decided to remix this lovely hanger book nook that I found on Thingiverse into a mech-themed display plinth. I downloaded the file and got to printing out the floor. Once that had finished, I took a few old gift cards and began gluing and cutting them into paneling. Then, I cut some insulated wire to form some pipes or cables along the base. Once all that had dried, I glued the mech to the base with some superglue, and used some slow-acting tacky glue on the ball joints to adjust and pose the figure as I desired. After the glue had dried, I got back to the airbrush and began applying a coat of primer to the base and applying some touch-ups onto the mech. Then, I applied a thin misting of white ink through my airbrush to establish some quick gradients, focusing only on the most upward areas. Afterwards, I went back over the white with a translucent purple, creating a lovely gradient of color. Moving back to my workspace, I cleaned up any overspray and applied a base coat to anything I didn't want to be purple. I began applying highlights to the purple. I took this project as a moment to experiment, as I find my painting often is dark, and I wanted something with a more vivid, cartoony style. With the cartoony vision in mind, I added a bright white undercoat to any area that I want to be OSL. Returning back to the airbrush, I applied a second highlight of white to the most upward-facing areas. Then I applied a thin layer of pink to really push the highlights further. Afterwards, I applied an electric blue to establish the OSL sources. Adventurer, if you've watched this far, then I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, I would really appreciate it if you would let the YouTube imp know by pressing upon these buttons. It really helps me make more videos for you all. Back to the painting. I cleaned up any overspray and applied a second layer of highlights across the mech. To enhance the glow of the OSL effect, I went back in with a titanium white glaze to boost the value further. Then, I black-lined the orange panels, cleaning them up with some neon orange. I added some color to the cables, a black and white pattern, followed by a bright yellow glaze for some hazard stripes. As a further experiment, I applied a bright neon blue edge highlight across the mech. This isn't the most realistic depiction of light, but it's certainly stylized. What do you think, adventurer? I painted a targeting reticle, and continued the freehand with a hazard symbol upon the drum. I was happy with the way the mech was turning out, so I moved over to Blender and got started with the Book Nook remix. Importing the STL, revising the topology to simplify the frame, and removing the original attachment points. Then, I got to work sculpting the hangar door. I'm no means an expert on 3D modeling, but I know a few tips and tricks to craft simple meshes for 3D printing. I crafted one side of the doorway, then used the mirror modifier to duplicate my work. Then, I manually adjusted the frame for a more sci-fi looking door. If you're interested in downloading this file for your own projects, I've got a Thingiverse link for a free download in the description down below. Once the door had been printed, I got to work sanding down the layer lines and applying a coat of Mod Podge as a sealant against the water-based paints that I would be using later. PLA plastics tend to warp when exposed to water, and this can help avoid issues. I primed the background off camera and got to work painting. I wanted the background to be detachable for filming and storage, so I used a small amount of green stuff and some magnets in the provided holes to create a strong bond. Wanting a bit more detail, I applied a thin freehand line along the doorway, and then got to work painting the world beyond. I must confess, I don't know anything about the Gundam lore, but I was feeling very inspired by the sci-fi aesthetic, so I decided to paint a planet into the background. This doorway could easily be an airlock of some kind. Perhaps this is a boarding action on a spacecraft. If you know more about the lore, does this background make sense to you? A few stars with a brush tap, and then a glaze to establish a thin atmosphere. Afterwards, I applied a light blue glaze across the background to blend the layers. Then, I came in with a light blue-gray and began sketching out clouds, mixing in titanium white throughout the process to give the clouds the impression of differing levels of reflectivity and glazing as needed. I darkened the frame and blacklined the panels. Then, I applied the same neon blue edge highlight. As a final touch, I free-handed a few arrows onto the doorway. Before I share with you the final result, I figured I would quickly give you my first impressions on Gundam model kits. First off, I found the MSRP of this kit extremely reasonable. Most sellers were offering it in the $15 range. When you consider that a single character model in the Warhammer line would be more like $40, this certainly looks like a great price. This particular kit did not require glue during assembly, which I'd consider a nice positive, but I understand that the master grade kits and above do. I found the mold lines were very well placed and easy to remove. My only mixed feeling on this kit was the ball joints. I found that they would occasionally detach during construction and were difficult to glue in place properly. However, they do allow a great degree of custom posing for the model. Perhaps I'm not experienced enough and there was a more obvious method to make sure they stayed secure. Anyway, let's take a look at the final results. So, how do you think my first Gunpla turned out? I certainly had a fun time trying something new. Please let me know your thoughts with a comment down below. For now, if you want to see more of my work with miniatures, why not click on the video on the top left? I hope to see you again soon. Farewell, adventurers.